Proverbs chapter 14 and verse 4. The Bible says, where no oxen are, the trough is clean, but much increase comes by the strength of an ox. There's a bit of a trade-off here. Where there are no oxen, there is no mess, but with the oxen comes the strength for a great increase. Another version says, where there are no oxen, the manger is empty, but from the strength of an ox come abundant harvest. And does anybody want to see abundant harvest in our day, in our time? Does anybody want to see increase in our day and in our time? I want to talk to you for the next few moments about a working farm. A working farm. Let's bow our heads. God, we thank you for those who've made the sacrifice to be here today. I ask you for these next few moments that you would give me your words to speak to your people. Anoint us to be hearers and doers. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. You may be seated. Now, oxen, that's not a word that we use, a phrase, that a word that we use much anymore, but oxen are just simply large cattle. And typically these would be males that had been manipulated in a way where they were strong and powerful, but their temperament was a bit docile. They were ideal workhorses. Now, ironically, when I was kind of finalizing some things today and I was reading about oxen and reading about cattle, coincidentally, something popped up on my social media and I went ahead and saved the picture. Something, go ahead and put that picture up, something from in Houston, Texas, where we were. That's a local news kind of person who gathers information, and they posted a picture today of a cow or ox. That's right there in Houston. Houston is just about the size of Toronto, but Texas is a bit different, so it's not way out of the norm that you would see an ox walking right down there through Houston. I just thought it was interesting. I was reading about this, and this popped up today on my social media. But these ox were the engine that farmers back when these verses were written, that these were the work engines that made farming possible. Now, of course, agriculture has always been a key component of human existence and human survival. As long as there's been people here, there's been the need for agriculture. And perhaps in 2024, in this modern time, we don't think much about the importance of agriculture, the importance of farming. We live in such a high-tech society. We live in such a fast-moving and modern society that many of the fundamental and even somewhat prehistoric building blocks are often overlooked or undervalued by a lot of people. It used to always be interesting to me when I used to travel a lot. Sometimes you drive out of the big cities and you go to some parts of, and for me it was the U.S. primarily, but you come out of the big city and you just see mile after mile of sometimes hundreds of miles of agricultural land. And it's amazing to me in a state like California, because when people often would think about California, they would first think about Hollywood and think about the Walk of Fame and think about Beverly Hills, and they might think about the glitz and the glamour and the award shows and the beaches and that beautiful weather all the way from San Diego up the coast, or people come from all over the world to drive along the Pacific Coastal Highway, and just that kind of unique drive through all these beautiful towns where you have this, beautiful beaches, but right there you have the cliffs and the mountains, and you drive through Torrey Pines and the Big Sur, and you drive through Carmel by the Sea. People come from all over to see these parts of California, but many people don't think about the fact that California is an agricultural powerhouse. It produces by far more product than any other state in the United States. There are more than 80,000 different farms and ranches just in California. If you go up and down the inner part of the state, you will see just farmland just as far as the eye can see. I read today that 1/3 of all the vegetables grown in the U.S. are grown in California. Read today that California provides about 3/4 of the fruits and the nuts for the entire United States. California provides about 20% of the milk for the entire United States. And I was also interested to find that of the common crops in the United States, there are 19 different crops that are only grown in California. Things like almonds and pistachios and walnuts and raisins and olives and plums are only, California is the only state that grows those. I was interested to find that with almonds in particular, not only does California provide 100% of the U.S. supply, but California provides 80% of the entire world supply of almonds. So many of us don't think about farming these days, but it doesn't matter how high-tech our cars become. It doesn't matter how dazzling our scientific discoveries become. It doesn't matter how advanced our intercontinental and intercoastal or interstellar travel becomes. It doesn't matter how smart our homes get. It doesn't matter how advanced robotics get. We would all be in trouble without some elements of good old-fashioned farming. Yes, they might use great modern machinery to make farming more effective and more productive. But at the end of the day, this age-old practice of preparing the soil and sowing something into the soil and then nurturing the seeds until they mature as plants and then harvesting those things for consumption is still the same. Now, of course, and I'm laying a bit of a foundation here, but of course, before the time of these multinational or multi-billion-dollar corporate farms, you had more individuals who would farm their own land to provide food for themselves and maybe their family or maybe just a few other people. But now you've got these mega farms that farm for millions of people. I was reading this week about one mega farm in China, and it is, I believe, the largest farm in the world. And they say this one farm covers 22,500 square kilometers. It's a place that produces grain, and the farm is 22,500 square kilometers. Now, just to kind of put that in context, if you look at the GTA, that's the Toronto region, the Peel region, the Halton region, the York region, the Durham region, all those regions together, if you combine all of those things, consider if you were to drive from Burlington all the way past Oshawa, this entire great GTA, you put all this together, the GTA is 7,125 square kilometers. So the entire GTA is less than 1/3 the size of this one farm. This one mega farm can produce food for millions of people. And so now that most of us do not have to farm to produce for ourselves, many of us, there are many now different ideas or different views of approaching to farming. There has been now a rise in what they call hobby farms. Now, with hobby farms, there are some farm-like activities that happen. Some farm-like work is done, but it is far from a full-time endeavor. There is potential with a hobby farm to produce fruits and vegetables, but these are not critical. The future does not depend on the product from a hobby farm. It's something that is far more recreational than it is vocational. Something that's recreational is something that you just do for enjoyment when you're not working. It's a distraction from when you're not working, but something that's vocational is something that is the primary work that somebody does. It is their main occupation. It is something that demands their time and something that monopolizes their efforts. It's not just a recreation. It is a purpose. It is a vocation. With a hobby farm, there is no real expectation of profit. The results and the effects of a hobby farm are not of great consequence. It's not a big deal when you've got a hobby farm. If you don't feel like farming for a few days or a few weeks or a few months, you can let it go for a few years and then maybe come back and decide you kind of want to play around in the garden a little bit. It's more just a nice conversation piece where somebody comes to dinner and you say, the cilantro on the plate, that's something that I grew myself. I went to the store and I bought everything else. I bought the meat, I bought the other vegetables, but the cilantro, that's something that came from my own garden. And sometimes you find where a celebrity or somebody who's otherwise wealthy, they might decide that they really want to invest in their hobby farm. They might have a barn that's there mainly for their entertainment and their enjoyment. And I gave them a couple of pictures of a barn like this, a barn that is kind of there for entertainment, kind of there for enjoyment. Those kinds of barns look a lot different. You go in these barns, you find maybe a few show horses, and you might find cattle that are far more pets than anything else. And there might be tractors and equipment around, but they kind of look like they just came off of the showroom floor. And you might even look at the floors of some of these barns, and it might feel like that you could eat off of the floor. These are not the barns of a farmer who is living and dying with every crop and every season. This is not the barn of somebody who recognizes that what they do on the barn today is going to decide and determine their future. When some of these people walk into their showroom, their pristine barns, their multi-million-dollar playhouses, if they walk in and they find a mess, somebody's probably going to get in trouble for that mess. If they walk in and the smell is unbearable, they'll probably turn around and run out and tell somebody, you need to go in and take care of that. People nowadays even rent out old barns and have their weddings there. They have corporate events in these old barns. And in some ways, these old barns still look like a barn, but in most ways, they don't really look like a working farm. They don't smell like a working farm. These other farms, they don't have the same priorities that a working farm has. It's similar in many ways, but it exists for an entirely different purpose. You see, the definition of a working farm is a farm whose agricultural land and buildings are in active use for crop production and or the raising of livestock. That was the definition I found of a working farm. It's a farm that's in active use for crop production or the raising of livestock. It's not a showpiece. It's not a testament of the work that used to happen there. But it's not a working farm if it's not actively producing something. A working farm implies that there is full-time work being done there. A working farm is not a hobby farm, but there is a far greater sense of purpose with the working farm. There is a far greater element of urgency with the working farm. The writer in Proverbs chapter 14 is using a similar analogy. He is acknowledging the age-old importance of a working farm having a consistent and somewhat predictable harvest. He's saying that a real farm, a working farm, has to have a harvest. And it has to be consistent. It has to take place in due season, every season, or else there is a problem. But he goes on in our verse to kind of bring out the fact that there are some things that a working farm has to have in order to produce the harvest that it needs. But these necessary things, they come with their own complications. These necessary things, they come with their own consequences. And some of these complications and consequences may not be ideal or pleasant. And so in this verse, he's saying that these oxen are one of these necessary items to produce a future harvest, but they do come with complications and consequences. The strength of the oxen was at the very core of everything that they did. But the oxen are not clean. The oxen are not potty trained. The oxen don't come and knock on the door and ask if you could let them go out to go to the outhouse. The oxen don't have great manners. The oxen don't know when you want them to be quiet. And you can get frustrated on a working farm and say, I just shoveled this out yesterday. Now look at it again today. I just cleaned this up yesterday. Now look at what it looks like and smells like today. You can say, I just addressed this a few hours ago, but now look, you're doing it again. In fact, on a working farm, the oxen will stand right next to you and make more mess while you're cleaning the mess. There's no concept of saying, well, let me at least wait until Farmer John goes back in so he doesn't feel like his efforts are futile. They will make a mess while you're shoveling the mess. And the Bible says that you could choose to get rid of the complications and the consequences by getting rid of the oxen. You can choose to do that. You can choose that the mess is just too much. It's too frustrating. It's too redundant. I have to deal with this every day. You could choose to get rid of the consequences and the complications by getting rid of the oxen. But he goes on to warn that if you get rid of the oxen, you get rid of the future harvest. And hear me tonight when I say that that is unacceptable for a working farm. That is the absolutely worst thing that can happen to a working farm, that there is no harvest. Let me say this tonight, Spirit of Pentecost. We can choose to be a showroom, or we can choose to be a workroom. If you go to a car dealership, you pull in and you'll see that they put their showroom right at the main entrance. You walk through the main doors and you walk in, you see their showroom. You'll find spotless, pristine models that they want to exhibit and showcase. The majorities of the cars in that showroom have never really been driven. Everything is original. Everything is brand new. There is no wear and tear. The tires still have those little spiky things that you get on brand new tires. They still has that new car smell that didn't come from a can or a canister or a new car smell tree. They have a legitimate new car smell. There are no miles on the odometer. Somebody comes by every day at the end of the day to wipe all the fingerprints, all the drool off of the windows. People have been looking at these showpiece cars. Pristine, beautiful, smells good, looks good. But that is not where real work is done. Because when a car comes to the dealership that has been driving around for some time, when a car comes to the dealership that's been through rain and been through snow, been through some dings, had some road debris, and the windshields are cracked, been chipped, and the paint's been scratched, some stains, some things that have been mysteriously spilled over the years on the carpet and the seats. The tires are worn down. When that car breaks down and can no longer function, and that owner doesn't know what to do to fix their situation, when that car can no longer be driven and has to be towed back to the dealership. That car is not brought through the front doors and parked in that showroom. That car is pulled around to the back where the real work takes place. It's not as clean back there where the real work takes place. There's nobody coming around every few hours to wipe the fingerprints off of everything back there where the real work takes place. It would probably take something industrial strength to take the fingerprints, all the grease and the grime and the dirt and the brake dust and all the stuff that's caked in to those fingerprints. It probably doesn't smell like air fresheners back there. It probably smells more like grease and exhaust and chemicals and all kinds of things back there. It might not be quite as climate controlled as the showroom is. Perhaps the bay doors are left open almost no matter the weather, because at that point, what matters the most is the accessibility, the ability to get in and get the work done. So if it's raining outside, it might be a little bit wet and messy inside. If it's snowing outside, then it might be a little bit messy inside. If it's hot outside, it might be a bit more uncomfortably hot on the inside. It's probably much louder back there than it is in the showroom. If you're going to have a conversation in that garage, you probably are going to have to yell just a little bit. The people who work back there are probably far more dirty and not as well put together as the salespeople in the showroom. In fact, when you go to the back and somebody's about to work on your car, if they're too clean, you might get a little bit nervous. There's no grease under their and dirt under their fingernails. You might wonder if they really know what they're doing. The same traits that might put you off if you came across them in a showroom are absolutely expected in a workroom, because those in the workroom have one purpose. That is to find and fix what is wrong. Find and fix what is broken. Everything else is secondary. Those back there in the workroom have one goal. That came in, it wasn't functional, and I'm not going to let it go until it's functional again. It came in and it couldn't move, it couldn't do what it was supposed to do, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make it work. There is an eternal message here for the church. Let us not forget who we are. We are not a showroom. We are a workroom. We are not a place to showcase brand new and pristine models. We're a place where the broken, the wounded, the scarred can come and they can find the healing that they can't find anywhere else. We're a place where somebody can say, I took this to so many different places and I tried a few. This guy said he knew something, and this guy said he knew something, and this lady said try this, and I made up my mind. I'm coming back to where it came. I'm coming back to where I got it. I'm coming back to those who I know they can figure out what's happening and they can fix what is wrong. We are not a medical museum. We are a hospital. That equipment in a medical museum is probably not even plugged up, or it's so outdated, they're just showpieces. We are a hospital. And I declare today, we are not a hobby farm. Spirit of Pentecost, we are a working farm. We are a working farm. We want to see people grow. We want to see fruits develop. We want to see lives change. We want to see hearts filled. We want to see people come one way and leave a different way. We are a working farm. Sometimes see people who are trying to impress other people with just how polished their church is, just how spotless and problem-free their church is. And I wonder sometimes if they've considered who it is that they're trying to impress. Because you'll never impress a working farmer with how clean your farm is if you're not producing anything. If there is no new growth, if there is no, you'll never get a working farmer to come in and be impressed with how clean they are if there is nothing that's being produced. The only people that you can impress with that are people who are not on a working farm themselves. So the proverb that we read, it says, if you want any harvest in the future, you need the strength of the ox. And if you're going to have the strength of the ox, you're going to have to accept everything else that comes with the ox. You have a choice to make. Biologically, if any culture, if any people are going to sustain themselves, they have to deal with some of the complications and some of the less desirable and some of the less convenient aspects of having children. Of course, we love our children, but there are some aspects, the dirty diapers and the sleepless nights, the fingerprints on the wall. I can't tell you how much furniture we've had to go through with two boys who just jump from couch to couch, and then you throw in the dog, and it's not always pretty, it's not always easy. But there is a strong biological urge in humanity to put up with all of those things in order to create a future, in order to sustain yourself. In the natural sense, if a church is going to have a future, we're going to have to deal with children in the natural. They might cry out when you'd rather them be quiet. See, Savannah had to leave. You see, parents, they might end up having to minister to their child more than they're ministered to when there's children in the natural sense. In Matthew chapter 19, we find a similar scenario where children came to Jesus. Matthew chapter 19, verses 13 through 15. Then little children were brought to him that he might put his hands on them and pray. But the disciples rebuked them. The disciples tried to stop the children from coming to Jesus. But in verse 14, but Jesus said, let the children come to me and do not forbid them, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. And he laid his hands on them and departed from there. So in the natural sense, we've got to remember that every child is a complete person with a complete soul. Child is not a half of a person on their way to becoming a complete person, but every child is a complete person with a complete soul. And a church with no children is in danger of being a church without a future. Now, I'm not suggesting that we don't teach our children to have reverence for the house of God. I'm not suggesting that we just let them run free to the point where they're just a distraction. And the Bible lets us know that we need to train them and we need to let them know certain things. But what I am saying is that we should make allowance for some things that might be less than ideal for the sake of future harvest. We have to allow some things and put up with some inconveniences that might be less than ideal for the sake of future harvest. It is an investment in the future. And I submit to you this evening that the same principle applies to those who are newborn in Christ. Yes, we're going to train and attempt to disciple. And yes, they're going to know that there is a standard and a level of maturity that we want them to strive for. But we will not be intimidated by the inconvenience of being a working farm. We will not be intimidated by the sights and the sounds and the smells that come with being a working farm. You see, a working farm is driven by a real appreciation for the value of the harvest. That farmer who comes out every single morning, they come out while you might still be asleep and not even thinking about getting up. They're up with the roosters. They're up before the roosters. And many times, and for almost every day of the year, they come out and there's nothing happening. They come out and sometimes they're just plowing, and they come out and they plant, but nothing happens overnight. And they come out day after day and they're looking at something. And somebody walking by might look at that field and say, there's nothing happening. Somebody walking by might wonder why you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to take care of this, and nothing looks different than it did yesterday. But that farmer does everything he does or she does because they recognize the value of the harvest. They recognize everything I do is about the harvest. Every moment that I wake up, every pain, every discomfort, every bit of inconvenience, there is value in the harvest, and the harvest is worth the effort. God, let us be like the words of Jesus in Luke chapter 19, where he summed up his mission. He says that the Son of Man is come to seek and to save that which was lost. There is a harvest. There is a purpose. I don't have time to get into some of these other verses, but there are so many verses that drive home the point that Jesus is aware and he is concerned about each person. The Bible talks about how at that time you could buy 5 sparrows for 2 pennies. But it says that not one of those sparrows, they're not even worth a cent. Not even worth a half a cent. 5 sparrows for 2 pennies. As cheap as that is, the Bible says that not one sparrow dies without God knowing about it. Not one is forgotten by God. That verse goes on to say that God knows the numbers of hair on your head, letting us know that God is concerned about each person. God is intimately aware of each person. And so this harvest that I'm talking about today, this is not just a nameless, faceless group to God. God knows each name. God knows the numbers on their head. This harvest that I'm talking about is not just statistics or not just a bunch of random numbers to God, but this is something that is valuable to God, and I'm trying to implore us here that if it's valuable to God, God, help us to see the value. If it's worth the sacrifice for you, let it be worth the sacrifice for us. If it is worth the effort for you, let it be worth the effort for us. God, if you're willing to put up with mess to make the harvest come to pass, let me get off of my high horse and be willing to put up with mess in order to make the harvest come to pass. God, if you're willing to clean them up every day that they need to be cleaned, God, let me be willing to be a part of the process. Let me not get weary in my well-doing, but let me remember that I'm in the farming business, and I'm going to stay in the farming business. I'm going to consistently break up the fallow ground, and I'm going to plant. I'm going to be willing to roll up my sleeves and get my hands dirty. I'm going to be willing to put in the hours when I don't see a harvest because I know that something is coming. I don't have time to get into so many other things, but you read through the New Testament and you see where Paul had to deal with so much junk in the church, so much mess he would have to write to churches about, things that would make you blush. Paul was having to address, but it was always worth the harvest to him. He always kept going. He always kept writing. He always kept reaching. We're in the people business. The kingdom of God is about people, but it's about all kinds of people. That is the harvest. That is the future. And we have to always be cognizant that we are not a hobby farm. We're not a showcase farm. People come rent and take pretty pictures and string up the lights. Smells good. Everything's catered and choreographed. We are a working farm. We want to see transformations take place. We want to see healings take place. We want to see growth in lives. Let's stand all over the building. Where there are no oxen, the manger is empty. The stalls are clean. There is no smell. But from the strength of an ox comes an abundant harvest. God is preparing us for a harvest. Let's always remember why we're here. Let's bow our heads. God, we thank you for your word today. God, I ask you, let this take root in our minds. Let this take root in our spirits. God, let us have this crystallized in our hearts. Why we're here, God, what you've called us to do, what you've called us to be, the work that you desire to do in this church and through this church. God, let us partner with you. Let us join with you in your heart. Let us join with you in your mission to seek and to save that which was lost. There are no costs that are too high. There are no sacrifices that are too great, because the harvest will be greater. My God, the harvest is worth it. The harvest is worth it. Every pain, every struggle, the harvest is worth it. The harvest is worth it. Amen. God bless you tonight. Thank you once again for being in the house of God midweek. Again, I know that a lot of things pull on us, a lot of different directions. I know that it is a sacrifice, but that's why I teach the things like I taught here tonight. We've got to remember who we are. We've got to remember our purpose. If we get weary and if we're not working the farm, God can't do what he wants to do through us and in us. God bless you. We love you. Remember, prayer Saturday from 10 to 11, service on Sunday, begin 9:30 with the Coffee and Connections for those who want to be here for that. Prayer at 10, and then 10:30, let's come expecting great things from God. God bless you. We love you. Let's shake hands and hug necks, and we will see you this weekend.